Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today, we're covering a build that I'm calling the Valiant Defender, which is one of the most potent defensive builds in the game, capable of keeping your party alive through even the most terrible situations, even if, let's say you happen to be playing multiplayer, and your teammates are somewhat less than reliable. In addition to that, we bring excellent melee damage and quite competent spellcasting to the table, so this character can really lead a party to victory by keeping them alive, outputting excellent damage, and supporting them with powerful supporting effects and spells. As a treat, we also get to do this using one of the least used character subclasses in the entire game, the Valour Bard. Valour Bard very rarely comes up during character optimization discussions, because it is true that for most characters, Valour Bard is weaker than either Lore or Swords Bard for what those characters are trying to do. But this character makes use of Valour Bard's unique strengths in such a way as to create a character that optimizes Valour Bards into a powerful and reliable character. It's easy to forget with Valour Bard that it's still a bard, and bard is just an amazing thing to be. It's a great spellcaster with excellent skill access and awesome abilities, so although Valour Bard is a narrower character than the other two bard subclasses, it's still an excellent character in its own right, and one that we can power up massively in order to create a Valour Bard that does exactly what it's trying to do, lead the party to victory with support and damage. I'm using this custom character as an example character here because I think this character makes an ideal Tav, perfect for the leader of your party, but of course if you want to build this on one of the companions, I think it also works very well for Will, given his sort of character and archetype, or Minthara, given the classes that we use during this build. If you're building this as a custom character, I recommend that you use Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf or Githyanki. The bonus movement speed from Wood Elf and Half Wood Elf are very powerful for this build that wants to be both in melee and next to its allies, so it will require a lot of mobility to get around the battlefield, and Githyanki's bonus skill access gives you the ability to power up this character's facility as a bard and just be the skill user for your team, taking yet more weight off the shoulders of the rest of your party. Although we will be multi-classing with this build, we're going to start with a level of Bard, just to make sure that we have access to all of the skills we want this character to use right from the very beginning of the game. It just makes your first couple levels that much smoother when you have all the skills right away. For our ability score selection, I'm going to recommend that you start this character with 17 dexterity, and that we then use Anti-Ethel's Hair to put us up to 18, so we can reach 20 with only a single ability score improvement. I don't normally like to recommend Ethel's Hair for most of my builds, but this build is going to be the main character, so it gets first priority on good loot, and it just makes this build play out so much smoother if you can spend another feat on something else while still reaching 20 dexterity. If you aren't planning to get Ethel's Hair this playthrough, then it's certainly not mandatory to do it this way. You can just start with 16 Charisma, go to 18 Dex, or use the Gloves of Dexterity in place of one of the other items that this build might want, but it just plays out a little bit smoother if you use Ethel's Hair to hit 20 Dexterity with this character. For our Charisma, for our other attributes, we're going to take 16 Charisma, and then we're going to take 14 Constitution. We don't really need more than 14 Constitution because this character is Dexterity based, so we'll have very high armor class. So while we will be concentrating on spells, we're going to have extremely high AC and be very difficult for enemies to actually hit. So the low Constitution won't matter as much as it might for another spellcaster. And then with our last two ability points, we're going to put those into Wisdom to make sure that we don't have the terrible Wisdom saving throw. We then, for our skill selection, of course, are going to grab all of the dialogue skills that we want to use for this playthrough. I recommend that you use the Guild Artisan as your background to get Persuasion and Insight for free, because that just frees up some skill access for other things, and that you then take Persuasion and Deception, take Deception as a skill known, because it's the other one that comes up the most often, and grab Stealth and Sleight of Hand with your remaining skills. This character makes an excellent sleight of hand user because it's a bard, of course, so you are going to be able to, and it's a dexterity-based character, so you'll be very good at opening locks. If you have another character that is spec'd into sleight of hand, then you don't need to do this and can put that skill into dialogue. For our starting cantrip selection, we're going to make sure that we have Blade Ward, because Blade Ward is actually quite useful for this character, which wants to spend a lot of time in melee, and which fights as much with its reactions as it does with its actual actions. So there will be many turns, even on into the late game, where you just want to Blade Ward yourself, if you are out of position and surrounded by enemies, though we will have other ways to apply Blade Ward to ourselves using items, most likely. And then we're going to pick up Minor Illusion, because it's just a very important utility cantrip that every party should have access to. We don't really need Vicious Mockery, because we have high dexterity, so for a ranged weapon we'll just use a bow, rather than using a cantrip, so Vicious Mockery is a little redundant for the character, though of course you can take it just because it's funny, hearing your character mock the enemies to death, and I certainly support that. For our spell selection here, we're going to grab Healing Word and Dissonant Whispers. Dissonant Whispers is the best level 1 combat spell, and Healing Word is kind of mandatory on every Bard build. Just such an amazing spell being a bonus action, and this character will likely end up using the buff on healing items that will give you bonus effects when you heal an ally, so you will want Healing Word to apply those bonus effects more easily. If you don't have another character who knows Longstrider, you definitely want to take Longstrider on this character, and Disguise Self is very useful for a lot of various dialogue in the game, so for a party face it just makes things much smoother. Of course, if you have the Hat of Disguise or another source of Disguise Self, then you can swap it out for a combat spell like Tasha's Hideous Laughter or Thunder Wave. Both of those are slightly more combat-oriented and defensive options. This character will end up being primarily a weapon user and not a spellcaster in the late game, but we have 16 charisma, so we are very good at spellcasting and very good at shooting our bow right from the beginning, so we're a potent combat force right from the start of the game. Finally, it's very, very important that you pick the correct starting instrument, otherwise you will ruin your entire run, so make sure not to mess this one up. And having done that, let's go to level 2. At character level 2, we actually have a choice to make as to which class we're going to take next. We could continue to take Bard levels, or, because we do intend to take 2 Paladin levels on this character at some point in the build, we could take those immediately to get earlier access to smites. However, Combat Inspiration from Valour Bard is actually a very powerful early game ability, so I think that the character plays out smoother if we just continue to level up in Bard at this point and delay our Paladin levels until later. If you want a more damage-focused version of the character, though, the earlier Paladin levels will give you smite attacks much sooner, and obviously that can be extremely powerful because smites do a ton of damage, so that is an option that you have available depending on what direction you want to take the character overall. For our spell selection at this level, we're going to grab one of the combat spells that we haven't picked up yet, probably Tasha's, because there's a couple early game enemies that this is very strong against. Or we could pick up a utility spell that we might want later on in the game, such as Featherfall, or Heroism, which is also a good way to keep our allies alive. Heroism is actually a ton of healing, so in long fights, it's a surprisingly effective spell. If you know that the fight is going to go long, you can maintain concentration on it and gain 5 temporary hit points every turn. As long as your ally's consistently taking damage, that's 5 healing a turn, which in the very early game is pretty useful. Nonetheless, for combat, I'm generally going to recommend Tasha's, or you can pick up Speak with Animals or something along those lines at this point in the game. At character level 3, we get to take our Bard subclass, and we get to push a button that I'm guessing many of you have never pushed, and take College of Valor. College of Valor Bard gives us a couple cool things right when we select it. For one thing, it has the best weapon and armor proficiencies of any of the Bard subclasses. We get martial weapons, and we get medium armor and shield proficiency. That's as good of a weapon and armor proficiencies as just about any other character in the game. The only thing we're missing is heavy armor, but since we're a dexterity-based character, heavy armor would actually be worse for us in most circumstances than medium armor, and in the late game we'll definitely prefer medium armor, so this is all the weapon and armor proficiencies that we need. Martial weapon proficiency lets us use a longbow, and also for ranged combat at this current point in time, and also gives us access to the martial finesse weapons that are going to be the mainstay of this build as we continue to level up. We also get expertise in 2 skills, so we can go ahead and take our expertise in persuasion, either both dialogue skills, or if you're the sleight of hand user, I recommend just putting expertise in sleight of hand and expertise in persuasion, and now you'll be excellent at picking locks and excellent at persuasion, and can cover almost all of the important skill uses for your party are covered with these two skill expertises and the skill selection that this character has. If there's any that you're missing, of course, if you're a Githyanki, you can use your astral knowledge to gain those. And in addition to that, College of Valour Bard also gains Combat Inspiration. Combat Inspiration works the same as normal Inspiration, where you use a bonus action to grant it to an ally, and then they can add it to an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. But Combat Inspiration from Valour Bard can also be added to weapon damage or armor class. Adding a d6 to your armor class is kind of the same as Lore Bard's Cutting Words, except you use it proactively instead of reactively. For the most part, this is slightly worse than Cutting Words because when used as a purely defensive option to increase your character's armor class, because you have to choose in advance who's going to get attacked. But the difference here is that it uses your bonus action rather than your reaction, so that frees up our reaction to do other stuff, which we will start doing shortly. We also can use Combat Inspiration to add to our weapon damage. A d6 of extra damage on a weapon attack is already a pretty nice bonus at level 3 that can often make the difference between an attack killing an enemy and not killing an enemy. But because this adds a d6 of extra damage, it also gets multiplied by critical hits, so it works very well if you have allies who want to get a lot of critical hit chance and build the items that increase your critical hit chance, and allies who are attacking frequently with advantage, like rogues. So this character works very well with rogue or ranger allies who are making attacks with advantage and can get frequent critical hits to add the extra damage. Combat Inspiration is a pretty powerful ability, and it's one that you actually want to use proactively to pass out inspiration to your allies, so don't forget to use this because it's very important that your allies be inspired so that they can use it whenever it's required. We also get a level 2 spell here, so we're going to go ahead and take Cloud of Daggers. This is just an excellent combat spell at this point in the game, and doesn't require us to have high charisma, so we'll be leveling our dexterity over our charisma later on. Cloud of Daggers doesn't add your charisma to damage or use a hit chance or anything, or have a saving throw, so it does amazing damage and can let us support our allies while still outputting great spell damage. And then we're going to pick up utility spells. We will probably replace one of our level 1 spells, whichever of these we're using the least often. At this point in the game, it's likely to be Tasha's Hideous Laughter. We're going to replace with a level 2 utility spell, either Hold Person, which in the early game is mostly a better version of Tasha's, or Enhance Ability to make sure we can pass important skill checks, Invisibility if our party is missing a source of that. I'm going to recommend Hold Person for this build right now, though we will sub that out later on because we will eventually want to have a spell selection that mostly doesn't require enemies to make saving throws, since our save DCs will not be particularly high. Having gotten Valour Bard, we can now pass out inspiration to our allies, both to help them output damage and keep them alive, but of course we will get to improve that even further as we move on in levels. At character level 4, we're going to continue to level up in Bards so that we can get our first feat, and the feat that we're going to take on this character first of all is going to be Sentinel. This lets us make attacks as a reaction frequently. So that means that we can use our main action to cast a spell or make an attack, and our bonus action to pass out Bardic Inspiration, but still be making incredible use of our reactions in order to use Sentinel attacks on our enemies. Locking enemies in melee combat with us is going to be extremely helpful, especially because this character often wants to be paired with a rogue or other sneak attacking character, well, a rogue that can sneak attack, so having enemies in melee, stuck in melee with this character is very powerful. And because of our high armor class, enemies are unlikely to attack us, so we'll get to use our Sentinel attacks pretty often, and enemies don't want to be tied down in melee with this character, so Sentinel will be extremely helpful. By this point, it's possible that you have Ethel's hair, or if not, you'll get it in the next couple levels, and your dexterity will be 18 already, if you have gone ahead and made that choice. But if you haven't, then this is still totally reasonable. Make sure you have a finesse weapon and a shield equipped, as well as a bow. That will still be your main source of damage at this point in the game. For our cantrip selection here, we're just going to go ahead and grab any utility cantrip that we want. Friends is very useful for passing important persuasion checks in Act 2, so we can pick that up now. It's a little bit dangerous in honor mode to use on other characters, but you can also cheese it by disguising yourself or leaving the area before the duration of Friends runs out, and then you don't get caught or attacked. But also there are some characters who you want to make persuasion checks against and then fight anyways, so Friends has no downside against those characters. Here we're going to take a utility spell, anything that doesn't require you to roll a hit or have an enemy make a saving throw, so I'm going to recommend Enhance Ability. And this character is set up as a support tank already, but we want to lean into that even further, so let's move on to level 5. At Bard level 5, we get Font of Inspiration, and since Combat Inspiration is such a powerful ability, Font of Inspiration is actually really important to this character, so that's another reason that I like rushing to Bard level 5, rather than taking the Paladin levels earlier, though again, that's a totally reasonable variant and one that you can definitely make use of. We also get improved Bardic Inspiration, so that increases our allies' armor class or damage even more, which are very powerful as well. And then for our spell selection here, again, at this point in the game, because we haven't increased our charisma at all, we are starting to fall behind on save DCs, so we're looking for spells that don't have those. You can use something like Plant Growth to lock down enemies without a saving throw, forcing them to stay in melee with this character and other characters other dangerous melee characters from your party. Plant Growth locks down enemy melee characters, preventing them from getting to you, locks down enemy range characters, preventing them from getting away, so has a ton of utility for this character. At character level 6, we again have a choice to make. We can either take our 6th level of Bard, because that's when Valour Bard gains extra attack, which of course is an excellent ability for any character that's making attacks. But this character is already making multiple attacks per turn, pretty frequently, because we have Sentinel, and that just lets us make a lot of additional attacks. So I would rather, at this point, give ourselves an alternate use of our reaction and power up the character's damage output, which is a little lackluster at this point in the game, since we don't have anything to increase it, by, instead of taking our 6th level of Bard, we're going to take our levels of Paladin at this point. I'm going to recommend that you take the Oath of the Ancients Paladin, because this character is going to be providing a lot of healing to your party, and Healing Radiance is an amazing healing ability. It heals yourself and all of your party members. It's a bonus action that lasts for 2 turns, so it is going to give you a lot of additional power to your party, and allow you to apply the healing-focused item buffs more frequently, without costing you an important resource. You can use your bonus actions to Inspire, you can use your bonus action for Healing Radiance, and then of course you have your reaction to attack with Sentinel. We also get Lay on Hands, which gives us another healing option. So if we need a standard action healing option, one that takes your full action, then we have it. Lay on Hands is not super powerful if you aren't putting a ton of levels in Paladin, but worth remembering for a more healing-focused build. The real prize, though, is of course at Paladin level 2, where we get access to Smites. This is going to be a melee character with a very high level of spellcasting. We're going to end up with full spellcasting at the end of this build with 6th level spell slots. So Smite is going to let us do a tremendous amount of melee damage. At this point, that lets us also mitigate the fact that we haven't put a ton of points into Charisma, because we can turn our high-level spell slots into Smite attacks, which are an incredible use for those spells. For our prepared spells at this level, we're going to pick up Bless, and even though I've talked about not wanting spells that use Charisma, Command is still just so good that we can make use of it anyways, especially if we end up doing Arcane Acuity stuff later in the game and building our save DCs back up. We also want Thunderous Smite, because that lets us stack a normal Smite from a spell slot and a Thunderous Smite onto the same enemy for even higher burst damage in a turn, and also gives us another alternate use for our bonus action. One of the great things about this character is how action efficient it is, with amazing uses of every single action type in the game. For our remaining spells, it's not that important, but Shield of Faith is a decent one to concentrate on. It's much less punishing for this character than for other paladins, because we have way more spell slots, so it doesn't cost us as many of our resources to use a level 1 spell slot on Shield of Faith. And concentrating on that on yourself means that enemies are that much less likely to attack you, more likely to attack your allies, and thus get walloped by a sentinel attack. Finally, our last paladin spell mostly doesn't matter, so pick up a situational one like Protection from Evil and Good. The other exciting thing that we get at Paladin level 2 is a fighting style, and there's a couple great options here. We're definitely going to be using a sword and shield, or a one-handed weapon and a shield, so we can use the dueling fighting style to deal 2 additional damage. We could use the defense fighting style to boost our armor class. Our armor class is really important on this character because we are a melee character with quite low hit points. But I'm actually going to recommend that we take the protection fighting style. This lets us keep our allies alive by giving disadvantage on attacks against our allies, and then they can activate combat inspiration to receive an extra D8 armor class. That means that enemies are taking, on average, around a -8.5 penalty to their attack rolls if you activate both of those features. And that means that enemies are going to miss on every attack, even against low armor class allies. So this gives us both another great use for our reaction. We can choose to either protect an ally or whack the enemy with a sentinel attack. And just helps us keep our allies alive significantly. So I really like protection fighting style on this character, to make sure that our allies are never dying. At level 8, we're heading back into Bard to get extra attack, so we can make multiple smite attacks per turn. And for our spell selection here, again, we're just looking for spells that provide utility and don't require a saving throw, so we can go back for something like invisibility. At Bard level 7, or character level 9, we get 4th level Bard spells, and again, one of the great things about Bard is how many good spells we have at each level that don't require enemies to make a saving throw, don't need us to have high save DCs. This character can provide greater invisibility to an ally. Again, notice how good this character is with rogue and ranger allies. Greater invisibility is awesome for those stealth characters. Or if you put expertise in stealth yourself, this character is a very capable stealth archer, and so you can greater invisibility yourself and provide a ton of damage from invisibility. Greater invisibility lets you make attacks without breaking invisibility, and this character's awesome at passing skill checks because you can have expertise in it, so you could have this character be a stealth archer in addition to the utility tank that is the character's main role. We can also, at this point, replace a spell like Hold Person with another utility spell. If there's a spell that you are missing, then you can definitely do that at this point. There's lots of good utility spells available that don't require saving throws. Things like Lesser Restoration are always useful to have in a party. So whatever your party is missing at this stage of the game, you can pick up. Freedom of movement is also very good to have as an emergency panic button because it breaks your allies out of stun. So I'm going to recommend that we replace Hold Person with freedom of movement, not to cast at the beginning of the day, but just to have in reserve if an ally gets stunned. And we always have a great use for that level 4 spell slot if we don't need freedom of movement, because we can smite with it for a ton of extra damage. Level 10. We're going to continue to level up in Bard and get our second feat, which of course is just going to be an ability improvement to max out our dexterity. Remember, we'll have 1 extra point from Ethel's Hair if you're doing that. If you're going the Gloves of Dexterity route, by the way, then you would want your dexterity to be at 8 at this point and could put these extra points into Constitution to be a little bit healthier. That can certainly be helpful. And then your extra feat could be Alert for bonus initiative, or Lucky just to prevent things from going terribly wrong with too many natural 1s in a row. For our spell selection at this level, we have most of the utility spells that we want, so you can just continue to pick up ones that might be useful in certain encounters, like Dimension Door. Remember that we want situational spells on this character, because our default use for spell slots is just going to be smite attacks. So spells that normally are somewhat weak are excellent for this character, because if they're like a 10 out of 10 when you want them, but a 1 out of 10 most of the time, then the minimum they can be on this character is like an 8 out of 10, because you can always use them as a smite instead. So that just increases the average quality of your actions dramatically if you have situational spells on this kind of character. At Bard level 9, we get 5th level spells. At this level, there's fewer utility spells that are interesting for a Bard to pick up, so I would recommend just grabbing Hold Monster. You could take, like, Greater Restoration or something like that, or of course go back for lower level spells, but Hold Monster will be relevant in some encounters if you are boosting your spell save DC, which is definitely an option available to this character, so pick that up in case you want to make use of it. For particularly difficult encounters where it will be good. Finally, at character level 10 and Bard level 10, or character level 12 and Bard level 10 in particular, we get a 1d10 combat inspiration, so that lets our allies gain 5.5 average damage or more than that on a critical hit with a combat inspiration, or 5.5 armor class, which is a tremendous boost both to their damage output and survivability. We also get expertise into more skills, so we can just go ahead and pick up the ones that we have not yet put expertise in. But most importantly, because we are at a 10th level Bard, we get to take 2 magical secrets. For our magical secret spells, we have a ton of options, but of course one that I'm always going to recommend that every spellcaster who can access it pick up is going to be Counterspell. Counterspell is one of the best actions in the entire game. It's a reaction that negates your enemy's entire turn and costs them a very important resource. This character has 6th level spell slots, so you can counter anything in the game. So Counterspell is going to be excellent, and one of the themes of this character is always having incredible things to do with your reaction. So now we can attack, we can protect an ally with the protection fighting style, or we can counter a dangerous spell. All of which, of course, are incredibly strong opportunities for us with our reaction. Our second spell is much more open as to what we want to take with magical secrets. You can never go wrong with Conjure Elemental. This is going to power up your party dramatically. Spending your 6th level spell slot on Conjure Elemental will massively boost your party, and so if you just want the most powerful option, I'm going to recommend that you take that. Of course, the most fun option is to take Banishing Smite, because we're a dexterity-based character that's making smite attacks. You can stack this on top of another smite for plus 5d8 from a 4th level smite, plus 5d10 from a Banishing Smite. So it's going to give you a massive bonus to your damage output if you have Banishing Smite on your party. The tremendous amount of burst damage that this gives you lets you just end encounters immediately by stacking a ton of additional damage on an attack, so Banishing Smite is also very powerful. Slightly less, I think, overall than Conjure Elemental, but still an excellent choice, and fits very well with the theme and power level of the build. Another option that is worth mentioning is Warden of Vitality, which lets you heal as a bonus action for 10 turns. It's a non-concentration duration buff, which is awesome to have on a character that wants to be concentrating all the time, and lets you spend your bonus action to heal an ally for 2d4 hit points. That can, or 2d6 hit points, excuse me. That can then pass out the buffs from buff on healing items, and so since this character is likely to be using those, can be a tremendously efficient way of doing that. For a default option, I'm going to recommend Counterspell and either Banishing Smite or Conjure Elemental, but of course there's tons of other great options in magical secrets. You can take Hunger of Hadar, still game winning. Doesn't matter that your save DCs are low, because the blind and slow are not based on save DC. You can take Sleet Storm to knock over enemies. Misty Step is always great to escape various situations. If you want a charisma-based ranged attack, you could pick up Eldritch Blast, though this character is more likely to be an archer. Or you could take Sanctuary to be even more able to keep your allies alive. For the most part, though, I think you're choosing between Banishing Smite, Conjure Elemental, and Warden of Vitality for your magical secrets, but there's tons of room for customization here. For our Bard spells at this level, there's a lot less interesting. We're going to go back for a utility spell of some kind from a lower level. And then for our cantrip selection, of course, we are going to take True Strike to annoy people in the comments, and because it wouldn't be a build for me without it. Alright, my friends, that is the Valiant Defender, a build that is amazing at keeping your allies alive, and also dishes out pretty solid melee damage, pretty excellent melee damage, and has great spell casting. But of course we can power it up even further with items, so let's go ahead and do that. For items for this character, there are several different categories of items that we're looking for that will help power up the character significantly. Firstly, this character is one of the better characters in the game at using the buff on heal item sets. The Whispering Promise Ring, which blesses creatures that you heal, and the Hellrider's Pride Gloves, and then the equivalent upgrades to these items later on down the lines. That lets you provide Bless and Blade Ward to your whole party by healing them, especially because we have the AoE heal from our Paladin levels, and bonus action healing with Healing Word and so on. This character also, of course, is going to want one of the the medium armors with uncapped armor class, such as the Armor of Agility. This lets us use our full dexterity modifier to armor class, and armor class is very important to this character because we want our allies to be attacked. We want enemies who have a choice to choose to attack our allies rather than us, because we're so good at defending our allies, a little less good at defending ourselves. For that reason, we want to buff our armor class up as much as possible with the Armor of Agility, with a shield. I recommend the Sentinel Shield because this character can use a bonus to initiative, just like every other character, and with other items that increase our armor class, like the Cloak of Protection. You can power up the character even further if you want to give this character a boost to its power level by using the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel and the Helm of Arcane Acuity. We're a melee attacker with 6th level spells, so this will let us stack up Arcane Acuity when dealing damage with our weapon attacks, and then as a bonus action cast a Hypnotic Pattern or Fear spell for devastating effect with high save DC. So that of course can power up the character drastically if you want to use that combination. We also need a melee weapon that's a finesse weapon in order to use our dexterity to attack. And there are two kinds of melee finesse weapons, or two specific melee finesse weapons that I think are the best for this character. The first, and the one you're going to use for most of the game, is Valour Bard. This fits in with the theme of buffing up your party's power level because it has the auras. With the Melody aura, you can use either Sing in order to give your party members bonus to their attack rolls and saving throws to help keep them alive, or Shriek to deal a ton of additional damage because then all enemies in the area take extra damage from ally attacks. Valour Bard is just a very powerful item, and this character is one of the best at using it, and actually wants to attack with it, which is kind of nice. Many characters that use Valour don't actually want to attack with it. Secondly, the other item in the late game is the Duelist's Prerogative, which gives you a second reaction. You do have to have an empty offhand to make use of this, so if you want the Duelist's Prerogative, you have to sacrifice the protection fighting style, but this character does use its reactions very well with Sentinel, so Duelist's Prerogative is very, very good for that, for this character as well. Honestly, I think you're just going to use Valour Bard all game, but I wanted to mention Duelist's Prerogative as an alternative way to build the character. You want a good ranged weapon, so you can use either the Deadshot or the Titan String Bow plus the Elixir of Cloud Giant Strength, and items that increase your critical hit chance, of course, are good for this character, which is making smite attacks, just like every other character with high damage dice opportunities, because you can still just blow up an enemy by critically smiting them. A question you might have about this character is what makes it better than the Sword Bard version of this character, the 2 Paladin 10 Sword Bard version, and that's a pretty reasonable question. The answer is that this character isn't better. It's certainly worse at dealing damage than the Sword Bard version, but it is better at keeping your party alive, so it plays much better as a teammate. Sword Bard is a very greedy, sort of Mary Sue kind of character, so especially in a multiplayer setting, this character will help your allies shine a little more, and also it's great for a run where you just want to explore something that you maybe haven't played, while being still a very, very powerful and useful honor mode build. Don't get me wrong, Sword Bard is absolutely broken, so Valour Bard is still a top tier build, even though it is mostly outclassed by Sword Bard. Finally, it's worth mentioning for this character that you are one of the best Illithid power users in the game. What you're looking for with Illithid powers in general is a character that both has high spell save DCs and makes attacks. This character is going to have both, at least reasonable spell save DCs and making weapon attacks, so you can make use of Illithid powers extremely well. In particular, Favorable Beginnings is awesome for your skill checks, and Luck of the Far Realms lets you blow up an enemy with a smite attack. And then you can use other abilities like Ability Drain to provide conditions and increase the damage output of your weapons. All of the Illithid abilities are good, but Favorable Beginnings and Luck of the Far Realms are the two most important ones for this character. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at the Valiant Defender, a genuine honor mode Valour Bard build. And of course, if you have, feel free to leave a comment and hit like. Helps me out with the algorithm, so I do appreciate you taking the time to do that. Means a lot to YouTube's metrics when people do engage with the video, so it really is helpful if you want to give a content creator a boost to hit one of those buttons. And of course you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides and other strategy game analysis. Cheers, my friends. I'll catch you next time.